Hi, my name is Sanford Hess. I'm a city government IT director. My talk today is called The Tectonic Speed of Government. And it's about government and change, especially technology change, because that's what I know best. It's written for civic technologists, people who are volunteering your time and your skills to help your own community. And it's also directed at people who are working from inside of government. And I'll freely admit that parts of this talk are just simple self-therapy. Look, government change can be hard to create, but it does happen. I'm going to talk today about strategies to create change and how to act when it happens. Topics that are ironically timely given the current pandemic going on. First, let me explain the format of my presentation. I am a huge fan of Pachakacha. Pachakacha is a format for storytelling where each speaker is given 20 images that are shown for 20 seconds each. So it's a 6-minute and 40-second speech. A Pachakacha night is great. People talk about all kinds of amazing topics, and the speakers and the images drive a very visual presentation, plus the time constraint is an awesome thing. When I was going to do a 45-minute speech on this topic, I decided to do 50 slides for 50 seconds each. But for the internet, I've decided to cut that in half, so it'll be 25 slides for 50 seconds each, or about 20 minutes and 50 seconds. And yes, this slide does count. So, my story begins here. This is Urbana, Illinois, a college town in central Illinois that I am the IT director, and I became the IT director in 2013 after a 20-year career consulting to governments while implementing financial systems. I come from the business analyst side of IT. I'm into data and problem solving and helping people use technology wisely. That's why I do what I do. Now, I do want to emphasize the one thing in this disclaimer. All of the ideas expressed in this speech are my own personal statements and opinions and do not reflect the statements and opinions of the city of Urbana. And I mean that. So, besides being an IT director, I am also a civic technologist. In 2016, I helped to form the Champaign-Urbana Hack Night. This was based on the Chicago Chai Hack Night model of volunteers, speakers, and pizza. Well, the CU Hack Night is dormant now. As many of you can associate, it's harder to make an ongoing hack event work in a smaller town, but I'm still active in all kinds of civic technologist events. One of the main ways is by hooking people up with data sets, and another way is by judging and mentoring teams who are involved in them. I also speak to university classes about data and data use and systems, and generally, I just love to promote the use of data by both governments and the communities. So my goal today is actually to use my experience to give you some perspective. My perspective is based on the city I work for, but also the partnerships we have with other government entities around us, like the Park District and the library and the county and other cities. It's also based on my past experience as a consultant when I was working with enormous entities, cities, very large ones, and counties, and state agencies and states, so both big and small units of government. My perspective also comes from both inside of government and from the outside as a consultant and a civic technologist. So look, every government is different, but there are many similarities because of best practices, regulations, and the collaboration. But please remember this. I am only speaking for myself in this presentation. So the first perspective I want to give you is, why is government resistant to change? So picture this scenario. Here you are, an IT director for a government, and people are approaching you. Civic technologists are coming in and bringing free labor and problem-solving skills and a desire to make things better. Or you're being approached by a university professor who has a grant opportunity and wants to partner with you. Why would government people be resistant to those things? And here, I'll admit I'm one of them. Well, one of the reasons right off the bat is the newness of the experience. You have to remember that this is a relatively recent phenomenon of people coming to us to help. Like a baby trying out new foods, each time we sit down, it's a new experience, and we want to avoid those bad ones. The squash might taste okay, but we remember the string beans. Usually, though, the first answer is money. Technology always requires new spending. It's not like we're replacing a pickup truck with another pickup truck. The new things that we buy in technology are always an upgrade, and they always cost more than the prior version. Or if we're taking on new efforts, we may need to buy new tools. Or with the grant, things that were bought with the grant money might require ongoing support and maintenance costs that we have to take on. In all of these, they require government spending. And government spending is laborious on purpose. We have a budgeting and procurement process that makes it challenging for us to spend money on purpose. That means spending money is going to take time. And really, ultimately, time is the most precious commodity we have. Look, forget about money. Government IT supports many departments and functions and people, both inside and outside of government. There are always more projects going on than we can handle. Even free effort from Civic technologists has a cost in taking our time away from other things. We're also limited in the people who can work on things, especially if those require newer skills, which may not be as widespread in government. We also don't have the same flexibility to add people that the private sector does. So time becomes the driving factor of how we make our decisions. And everything that we take on is going to increase our maintenance workload. Maintenance and upgrades are an underappreciated but critical part of IT. That hardware that we get, those Internet of Things sensors, well, some of them are going to fail or require repairs. Or the software app that someone builds for us, well, that's going to have to be upgraded when the infrastructure changes, or the operating system gets an update, or browsers change. Everything that we take on increases our maintenance workload. And it's a constant battle against entropy, because change here causes problems over there, and I am looking at you, Java. Ultimately, a lot of these maintenance and upgrade needs are driven by cybersecurity. And cybersecurity has become one of the most critical things that we face. Look, I love open data. I love helpful solutions. But my job as an IT director is all about cybersecurity right now. Cybersecurity is changing our priorities and draining our resources. My budget request for the coming year is nothing fun. It's 4 things for cybersecurity and records management. And I'm not even talking about getting hit with ransomware. I'm just talking about doing the preventative measures that we need to do to keep things secure. Cybersecurity impacts all the things I just talked about. It drains money, it drains time, and it creates an ongoing need for maintenance and upgrades to everything else to keep things secure. However, cybersecurity is my trigger to give you my 3 recommendations as an IT director for your personal cybersecurity. Number 1, you should use a password manager with multi-factor authentication. Let the password manager generate complex and different passwords for every website that you use. The password manager will keep them all straight. That's its job. Number 2, patch. Patch your phone, patch your computer, patch your doorbell, patch your thermostat. Anything that can take upgrades should be upgraded constantly. And number 3, you should never use public Wi-Fi without a virtual private network, a VPN connection. There are many out there that are free or low cost, and you should use them whenever you're using public Wi-Fi. Okay, back to the presentation. Why do I call this the tectonic speed of government? Well, let's go to the central metaphor of that. The tectonic plates of the Earth are the pieces of the Earth's crust that are slowly moving around and touching each other. Where they touch, that movement, they're moving, but they touch and grip on each other. And so what happens is pressure builds up. And it takes long and concerted pressure to move, but on the surface, it looks like nothing is happening. Well, government change is like that. Government change does happen, but it moves slowly. And nothing might visibly be changing on the surface, and you have to continue to apply that pressure for a long time until there's a crack. Now, when the Earth has that crack, we call it an earthquake. There's a sudden shift, and suddenly everything is altered. Literally, the landscape is different. Government change can be like that too. It takes a long time to happen, but when it does happen, it can actually be quite jarring. People are suddenly open to new ideas or ready to try new things, and sometimes funding is even available. So, for those of us who are trying to create change in government, you need to sense the rhythm of that and be ready. It's going to be a short burst of energy, and the problem is if you don't jump and take advantage of it right away, it's going to calcify into the new, well, that's how we've always done it. So, how do you know when that shift is happening? Well, with apologies to the film San Andreas, it may not be this obvious. In fact, you may not know until afterwards. Much like an earthquake, if you've never experienced one, while it's happening, you may not realize what's going on. It can be a weird experience. And fortunately, I have an example to point to that we've all just passed through and are continuing to do so, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. This is the reason you're watching me on video at all. This talk was written to be delivered live at the Code for America Summit in March of 2020. That summit was canceled. This next picture shows Washington, D.C. during that time with an eerily empty mall. It's good that the summit was canceled because back home, we were scrambling like every other government to change from what had been an entirely on-premise workforce to a work-from-home environment. Things we had never dreamt of became reality, like a remote public meeting on Zoom. New priorities existed now. Suddenly connecting our employees was so much more critical than anything else that we were working on. And new funding existed also. Now this is just one example, and it's an extreme one. It was not the kind of change I had in mind when I was preparing this talk. But you can create other change, and it can be on a local scale within your own community. The remainder of my talk is about suggestions on making that change. Look, the path ahead is long and difficult for civic technologists or government employees who want to make a difference by working within your own area and your community make change. You have passions, or you better, and important goals you want to achieve. But there is a long and treacherous path. To follow the analogy, there are lots of ways to slip and fall, to get lost, or to simply give up and turn back. It takes long, concerted effort to cross that bridge. So, let me now give some more specific strategies on working with your local governments to try to create that change. My first recommendation is to walk in the front door. What I mean by that, if there's information you want or things you want to talk about, make an appointment and come in and ask. An example of the opposite is scraping information from a website. Coming in and asking for the information is so much easier. Instead of writing code and getting potentially bad data, you're going to get a nice, crisp, clean data set from us. Or if there are problems with the use of the data or concern, you can talk about those and mitigate them, maybe by anonymizing the data or removing some of the information that may be objectionable. You have the opportunity to work with them if you come in the front door. But sometimes that requires knowing when the door is open. And that is a matter of timing. There will be times where you need to wait for the wave. There is an ebb and a flow of events in government that is driven by the budget cycle and the fiscal year. And even if you don't require money, keep in mind that time, the most precious commodity, is driven by the same cycle because we plan our projects in advance. So there will be times where you need to wait for the wave. It can get cold waiting out there. Notice these guys are wearing wetsuits, and sometimes bringing a friend is a good idea. When the swell does come, timing and preparation are critical, both to surfing and seizing the opportunity for change. This next picture is a picture of me taking a picture, in another part of my life as a scout leader. The scouting motto is, be prepared. When you do catch that wave, you have an opportunity, but you need to be ready for it. So if you sit down with a government entity to talk about change, you need to show up with a plan or some ideas. You'd be surprised how many people don't. You need to make yourself available to them during their workday, which might require taking time off of your workday. If you get assigned action items, do them, and do them well. You have an opportunity to build a reputation and a relationship from your first meeting. And know that if you blow your first impression, you may not get a chance to make a second. When you sit down with an entity, you should have a plan, but also take some time to learn about their problems. They might have interesting problems to work on, or at least problems you know how to solve. Consider partnering with them on some of their issues, because then they'll be more responsive to work on yours. One of the greatest successes we had with the CU Hack Night was with the Sheriff's Office and their jail data. They needed some retroactive statistical analysis, but the data was kind of messy. So we worked with them to clean up their data. They got what they needed out of it, and they made that data set of jail information available for all kinds of analysis. So that is how you build a relationship. And talking about criminal justice brings us to this point. Big rocks are heavy and hard to move. Look, I want to solve climate change, end hunger, and clean the oceans, but none of these are in the scope of something I can do by writing an app. Professionals spend their careers working on these problems, and they're not incompetent. It's hard to move the big rocks, and it's frustrating. Sometimes chipping away at those rocks is the best we can do. So start small. Take on tasks that will get you closer to the goal, and understand that these big rocks are going to take decades to wear away, and none of us are going to be able to move them on our own. Which feeds into this next point. You gotta play the long game. This is going to be frustrating, but I really want to be realistic about it. Change takes time, especially change that sticks. Like in Monopoly, you'll have ups and downs, and early problems can be overcome, although early successes can also be squandered. Also like Monopoly, there can be different sets of rules, so be careful about that. And also like Monopoly, it's easy to give up before it's over because it takes so long. Remember the tectonic plates. You got to apply pressure for a long time before there's going to be a shift. You need to understand that's how the game goes. You can't play Monopoly in 15 minutes, and you can't create meaningful change in a semester. Prepare yourself for iterations. Unlike a physical building, in IT, the first solution isn't usually the final product. In fact, build one to throw away is a classic IT proverb. Building an app or getting a data set isn't the end of the process. It might meet the requirement for a hack event or a student project, but it's not going to create real change. Plan to rebuild your work several times, and for it to morph in different directions as it goes. And in fact, if it morphs, that's good, because it means you're getting feedback because you're getting used. Look, keep in mind that you're going to be working on these things for a long time. This is not a sprint, this is a relay race. Approach your work as a team of people who are tackling larger issues. You need to work in groups that are going to blend your skills and interests. One of the reasons for that is that people will come and go. So build your team designed for that. Understand that students or volunteers are going to be irregular attendees. You need to build something that's going to carry forward from person to person to person. That means creating things like documentation and onboarding materials. And you need to have some organizational history that's going to carry across groups. This is a long race, and if you really want to make a difference, you have to plan for it. which gives me a chance to make a final point and give a shout out to Code for America and Civic technologists everywhere. You are volunteering your skills to improve your own community. You also are volunteering in an incredibly difficult realm. You are awesome, and I want my talk to be encouraging. Change takes time, but it can happen. Hopefully, I've given you some perspective and ideas about how to work with governments. I also want to say thank you to everyone who works within government already. You are making a difference every day. For those of you who don't work within government, consider joining us inside. It is a great career. And look, in conclusion, I just want to say this. Improving our communities is a wonderful goal, and moving those big rocks is going to take all of us. Thank you.